Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, thank you for attending, and particularly I would like to extend my gratitude to Migration International Organization, its representative, who immensely helped us to organize today's meeting and fully was involved in all the activities combating pandemic impact, which in itself began a few months ago. It's also noteworthy that during COVID-19 pandemic, steps taken by Georgian government and subsequently sharing successful experience is directly linked with our today's meeting, and it is a good example how the state should assist its own citizens during the crisis. Georgia and the whole of the world has faced an unimaginable challenge from the day one, and we were forced to take fast and decisive steps in extraordinary circumstances. The steps had to be subsequent, measured, in order for our citizens who faced huge problems beyond our borders, provide a necessary assistance, that assistance to be timely, effective and needed. Today's survey, which will be presented, and for that I would like to extend my gratitude to JPI Strategic Solutions, who helped us to implement this survey. They will help us to present exact picture and analysis, how effectively the country has dealt with the challenge and what were the steps that state took to assist its own citizens. You well aware that from first days with the task of Coordination Council, MFA, had two key tasks. First, provide assistance on site or whatever they were, and they helped them to return to the country. For that, we have very tangible results. More than 23,000 citizens were assisted abroad to somehow mitigate the burden that they faced because of the pandemic, and then help them to return. Naturally, with all state agencies, we were actively involved in the whole process, and together with the Coordination Council, we were fully worked to achieve result-orientated outcomes. It's also noteworthy that Georgia's experience that you will see in this survey presentation will help us to share international community. Our results and the analysis in itself will help our country as well as our partner countries to share this positive experience. With this regard, we do consider next year, 2021, to host international conference. This conference will be well organized together with the UN respective units. Before the conference, we will start sharing our experience through different events in UN different departments, and that in itself will help us to be better equipped if or when the country will face similar challenges, to take similar and timely steps and more goal or result orientated as we did in the past. As you know, company representative will discuss these issues. The survey was conducted on national level, where were involved Georgian citizens as well as the people who returned, and I'm convinced that this data as well as results of the survey, which we will all see together here, will show very clearly that Georgia's approach was timely and appropriate. Survey result also shows that efforts of Georgia helped to deal increased kind of activities of the diplomatic entities abroad. I again would like to extend special thanks to our partners, international organizations, UN representatives that are here today, also the Migration International Organization who is present here today with us, and the company who conducted this survey. And now I would like to ask them to present their views, their findings and analysis. And please, let's share the results with everyone. Thank you.
Strategic Solutions, a Washington, D.C. consulting firm, which was commissioned by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to conduct an independent survey among the Georgian public and among those assisted by the ministry in returning to Georgia. The object of the research was to gain an understanding of the perceived impact the ministry has had in handling the COVID-19 pandemic. By all accounts, the ministry and the Georgian government receive extremely high marks for its handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. The ministry has very high job approval rating, much of which has been driven by its assistance in returning Georgians from abroad back to the country. The ministry and the Georgian government also receive very high marks for its handling of the quarantine zones returnees were placed into upon their arrival back to Georgia. A colleague of mine will be presenting more details about these findings shortly, but clearly the ministry has met and exceeded expectations on its handling of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Hi, my name is Lucy Flynn, and on behalf of JPM Strategic Solutions, today I'll be presenting to you the results here. Essentially, high approval for the assistance provided by the state to compatriots living abroad during the spread of the coronavirus. Let me go ahead and get started here. So the research that I'm going to be presenting on, there are a few surveys. The first one is a survey of the general public that was conducted via telephone from 14 to 19 May of this year. The sample size was 1,090. It was nationally representative, according to census data. And again, as I mentioned before, using a telephone panel. Margin of error varies between questions, but maximum plus or minus 3% for any single question. We also conducted a client survey, which was a survey of 436 Georgians who returned to Georgia during the pandemic with the help of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. That survey was conducted from late July through early August. There's also, at the beginning of the presentation, just a little bit of comparative results from a comparative survey by Gallup International across 18 countries. So let me go ahead and get started. So Georgians view that their government has handled the coronavirus pandemic better than other countries. When we ask people specifically, do you think your government has handled it better, about the same, or worse? 88% said better, and as you can see, very few said the same or worse. And we might think that those opinions are similar across many countries, but if we look at these Gallup results, we see that Georgia is tied with only Malaysia in terms of, if we look at the dark blue and the light blue together, that strongly agree and agree. And we can see that only Georgia and Malaysia have such a high assessment of their government's performance. And there's a very wide range of assessments as we look across the world. So a strong majority of Georgians approve of the job that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is doing. When we ask them specifically, do you approve or disapprove? We have, now it's interesting to compare these two results here. The general public, 68% approve, and returnees, which are those people who were who the Ministry of Foreign Affairs helped return to Georgia, they have an almost 90% approval rating. And if we think about it, those are people who have more experience with what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is doing. So the majority of people the majority of the general public here in Georgia know something, have heard something about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs assistance for their compatriots abroad. When we asked people at the time of this survey, during the last few weeks, have you heard anything about what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is doing for Georgians abroad during the pandemic? We can see that most people, about 85%, had heard at least something. And when we ask them, based on what you have heard, do you have a more or less favorable opinion of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? Again, the vast majority of people felt more positively about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs based on what they have heard. Most people believe that the information that they have on what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was doing during the pandemic is reliable. The general public, 3 out of 4 people said that that information was reliable or very reliable. And then returnees, the people that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs helped to come back to Georgia, more than 9 out of 10 said that they felt that the information was reliable. And again, that second population there is the people that have more experience with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Now, this is, I like this result a lot. Most Georgians did actually care about what was happening to their compatriots abroad during the pandemic. When we asked them specifically, how concerned are you about Georgians who live abroad and are dealing with the coronavirus outbreak in the country where they reside? Are you concerned, somewhat concerned, a little concerned, not concerned? We can see here that 92% of the general public said that they were concerned or very concerned about their compatriots living abroad. And similarly, again, this is sort of an extension of the fact that of the evidence that Georgians do care what happens to their compatriots abroad. 3 out of 4 surveyed consider it right to use state resources, to use state money to repatriate their compatriots from abroad during the pandemic. For this part of the questionnaire, we read them 2 statements and asked them to agree with one statement or the other. The first statement, the government should use state resources to bring all Georgians who want to come home. 3 out of 4 people said they chose that statement. And the second statement, it is really up to Georgians who are living abroad to use their own resources to get back to Georgia. We can see that there's also some don't know answers to that question. We can see that not even 1 out of 4 said that they agreed with the second statement. So when we asked we went a little further in this survey and we asked the general public, what exactly do you think is important? What should the Ministry of Foreign Affairs be doing? And as we can see here, medical assistance, transportation back to Georgia, and stipends, financial assistance to those in need were the most popular answers. But we can see there's also high levels of support for legal and consulting assistance, also high levels of support for providing housing. In general, Georgians just really felt that their compatriots abroad deserved a lot of help. When we ask them, we try to ask questions in a few different ways during a survey. For this one, we read people a list of different kinds of help that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs could give them, and we asked them to choose the 2 most important. So if we look at those numbers, they're going to add up to more than 100 because you got to choose more than one. And arranging free travel back to Georgia was the most popular positive answer. Providing medicine and medical treatments to Georgians abroad, and providing financial assistance. Those were the top 3. But we can see there's a wide range of answers there. Now, before I move on to talk a little bit in a little bit more depth about Georgians who were returned, the opinions of Georgians who were returned to Georgia by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs during the pandemic, I'd like to just quickly summarize the last section. First point we can take away from that is that Georgians feel positively about how their government, and specifically the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, has handled things during the pandemic, and they feel more positively than people in other countries do. Another takeaway from that is, and we're going to see more as we go a little bit more into the opinions of returnees, but the populations that have more experience with what happened feel even more positively than the general public. And another takeaway is just that Georgian public opinion tells us that Georgians really do care about the welfare of their compatriots abroad, and they are willing to have, they are in support of state resources going to help those people. So let's move on now and talk about client survey results. Now, when I say client survey, I mean specifically Georgians repatriated by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs during the pandemic. We asked people how they got in touch. How did the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, how did you let them know that you needed help? Nearly all returnees contacted the consulate or embassy where they were about the return process. 87% said specifically that they had contacted the consulate. And of that 87%, we asked them why, what were you after? And the vast majority of them said they wanted to get back to Georgia, they wanted to repatriate. Nearly all returnees state that the consulate was able to help them. 87% said yes, absolutely. Very few said a little or no. And we asked people some questions about what would have happened if the Ministry of Foreign Affairs had not been there to help you. The first question here is about, would you have been able to find help elsewhere at all? More than half said no, they do not believe that they would have been able to find that help elsewhere. And then when we asked, without the assistance of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, embassy or consulate, would you have been able to find help as quickly, as efficiently? And as we see there, almost 80% said no. They believe that it would have taken much longer. The majority of returnees found the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, embassy, and consulates help to be effective. 64% said very helpful, 28% said just helpful, and we see less than 1 out of 10 said not helpful. Again, the majority of returnees feel that the timeliness of the help provided by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was satisfactory, that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was able to help get them back to the country quickly in a reasonable amount of time. 65% said very timely, 26% said just timely. We also asked them a question when it comes to the expectations you had with the Georgian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, embassy or consulate. Would you say that they exceeded expectations, met expectations, were below expectations, etc.? And we see here that the majority of people said that expectations were definitely met. And we looked at a little bit of, there are a lot of different kinds of Georgians living abroad, young, old, men, women, many different demographics. And we noticed if we broke this down, just here's age as an example, there's not a big difference depending on if you're asking older people or younger people. Opinions were really pretty consistent among returnees. Almost all returnees say that they would contact the Ministry of Foreign Affairs again if they needed help. 9 out of 10 people would be likely or very likely to contact the Ministry of Foreign Affairs again for help. The vast majority, now we have seen this slide before, but this is just to put it into context a little bit because now that we've looked a little bit more about the experience of the returnees. Again, those people who have a lot more experience with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the help that they provided, 9 out of 10 of them approve of the job that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has done. Returnees also expressed satisfaction with the assistance that they received in terms of protecting their rights. I'm going to read this question out because there's a lot in it. We said, generally speaking, how satisfied were you with the assistance provided by the Consular Service or Ministry of Foreign Affairs or Embassy in terms of protecting your rights as a Georgian? And by that we mean rights such as promoting your freedom of movement, the right to health care, providing information about the legal grounds for your stay in the country, and other legally guaranteed assistance. Were you satisfied or unsatisfied? And again, we see that basically 9 out of 10 returnees say that they were satisfied with that help. Again, quickly, before I move on to the third and last section of this, I'm going to just say a quick thing about this second section. In general, pretty much across the board, really, the opinions of those Georgians that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs assisted to repatriate from abroad were very positive, and they are significantly more positive than opinions of the general public, the people who have less experience with what happened. And kind of just one more takeaway is that we just gave you one example here, but there's very little demographic variability in the opinions of returnees. They're pretty consistent. So this last section, it's also on the returnees, but it focuses a little bit more on what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs did for them as they hit the country and after they arrived in the country. So we asked, so as everyone here knows, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs quarantined the people that they helped repatriate. So we asked, generally speaking, would you say you were satisfied or unsatisfied with the quarantine zone you were placed in upon returning to Georgia? We see that 95% were satisfied, and the dark blue there we can see is most of that 95%. So 95% were satisfied, and the vast majority of those were very satisfied. If we look over at the age breakdown, again, we see not really much difference. Young and old Georgians had very similar experiences in their quarantine upon returning to Georgia. We asked them, what did you like best? The most popular was staff attentiveness, the staff in general. The returnees felt that they were treated very well by the people who were taking care of them in these hotels. People also liked the food. The food was popular. They were probably happy to get back to Georgia and be eating Georgian food again. They felt that it was comfortable. But as you can see, there's a wide range of answers here. We also asked, of course, we asked negative questions too. We asked, what did you like least? And as we can see here, 11% said, they didn't like the fact that they were isolated, locked up. We do need to keep in mind that that is the definition of quarantine. They were, of course, not happy being in quarantine, but it was, of course, not negotiable. 1 out of 10 people were not crazy about the food, but again, 6 out of 10 said they really liked everything. Now there was, just really quickly before I do these next 2 slides, so the returnees came back, they were met at the airport, they were met with some services there, then they were transported to the quarantine zones, and so this first slide here is about the arrival process. So this is when you hit the airport. What was it like? So generally speaking, were you satisfied or unsatisfied with this upon your arrival back to Georgia? And we see everybody liked pretty much everything. About 9 out of 10 people said that they were satisfied with the thermal screening, organization into transport to get to their quarantine zones, availability of masks, adherence to social distancing rules, and most of those are very satisfied. Now, this second bit is once everyone was organized onto their transport and they are being moved to the quarantine zones. So again, 9 out of 10 say that they were satisfied, most of those very satisfied with all three things here: adherence to social distancing rules, provision of lunch, if they were under transport for more than a certain number of hours, they were provided with food on the transport, restroom stops. We asked them, please tell me if you were satisfied or unsatisfied with, and this is once they got to the quarantine zones. And we can see here that the most popular were the comfort of your room, the registration process, how easy it was to talk to the staff in the hotels. But if you look down the list there's not a lot of variability. People assessed everything very highly. And very quickly, let me just summarize that last section. People were returnees assessed very positively, really all aspects of the care that they received from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs upon reaching the country. That includes what greeted them upon arrival, it includes their transport to the quarantine zones, and it includes their stay in the quarantine zones. And again, like in the last section, there is little, we just gave you one example here, but there is little demographic variability among opinions. So I believe that concludes what I have to tell you today. Thank you for listening.
Good afternoon. As you know, MFA key function is to protecting our citizens' rights abroad. Numerously, it was mentioned efforts that the MFA was actively providing our citizens abroad. But I would like to draw your attention one more time to the activities that MFA was conducting and still continuing for our citizens and improving their welfare and protecting their rights abroad. COVID pandemic put huge challenges to the world and to the Georgia, and our ministry had to make decisions on site really fast, and that while in a crisis, I mean, of course, you have to prognose, you have to calculate, to do quick steps, and our diplomats are already abroad. With this regard, I would like to say that we undertaken huge work with our partner organizations, and last year we have prepared our diplomatic units and consulates to be ready for such cases. So if it would to arise, unfortunately at that time nobody had expectation that the world would face such a global pandemic. Therefore, we can say that experience that our diplomatic representatives has received was very important, which was very useful. But again, I have to say many of decisions were made on site quickly and in communication, with the ministry. The minister also has mentioned that majority of Georgian citizens abroad received tangible assistance in numerous forms, would it be a assistance locally there, or provide or arranging the safe return to the Georgia. You know that the public was fully informed in timely manner about these activities. There was 75 flights were organized for people to return to Georgia in timely manner. 25,000 Georgian citizens returned to Georgia, not only via air but also land and water. As for providing assistance locally. Very interesting criteria have been developed. Obviously, they were based on the needs that they had. We identified we have prioritized the citizens who really were in need of such assistance. There was underage citizens with the chronic disease, with the healthcare difficulties, pregnant people with disabilities, the sailors that who returned and safely and in timely manner returned to Georgia with the efforts of our ministry. Such assistance will provided to 23,000 citizens. As far as I know, on the screen you should be able to see the breakdown, what kind of assistance was provided to different groups of the citizens. Despite closed borders and limited flights, I would like to thank all countries. We still managed to return our citizens in organized manner. Often we not only were receivers of assistance, but we're also assisting others. There are numerous experiences how we helped our partner countries to remove safely foreign nationals from the different locations. And it is again highlighting how important to have coordinated approach to reach tangible results. It also noteworthy that during the pandemic, despite such a difficult situation, closed borders, restricted air space, we haven't stopped repatriation of deceased from abroad. And I would like to say that more than 100 such cases was assisted and conducted by the ministry during this time. Also, it is noteworthy, together with the Ministry of Healthcare, very effective project. This is an online consultations involving infectionists from the ministry. You know that in most cases, our citizens weren't able to receive the consultations from the countries that they were leaving. That's why we're trying to provide tangible assistance and consultations to the citizens. And for that, I would like to thank Ministry of Healthcare and for such cooperation. And briefly, I would also like to say a few words about the results of the survey. Thank you to the company that conducted it. It aimed for us as a ministry to identify key problems, key challenges that in the future MFA might face, to be able to be ready and to be able to act in preventive manner, and nobody can escape this. I mean, while analyzing results that we saw, expectation is much higher, and that kind of makes MFA more kind of obliged to provide all respective protection and assistance to our citizens abroad. And then for that, I would like to thank again the company who conducted the survey. As you know, crises are characterized with specific events. And what does it mean? That every day means of the citizens are deteriorating. And it is important for us to know what need our citizens might have. It has to be well analyzed, understood, and based on latter, we need to take subsequent steps. So, based on such analysis, surveys, and our experience, we came to conclusion that it is essential to develop unified regulation, some standard, a national standard that in the future will make interstate cooperation with regards to protection of rights the citizens abroad. And so unfortunately we identified that during such pandemic there is no unified regulation, despite the fact that there are some crisis management guidelines or handbooks. Unfortunately, all of the countries face same challenge. There is no unified regulative framework which will be a mandatory to implement, and which would have kind of assisting quality to how to behave or how to act in such circumstances. So our initiative, as it was mentioned by Mr. David, we are starting a new project together with our partner international organizations that have more experience, and we always are we know that we can rely on them. We would like to develop a unified regulatory framework, have discussions, make analysis, and from analysis we see not only successful examples or successful practices, but we can also see discrepancies or gaps, so we can simply act better and improve for the future. Therefore, our project will be directed towards making this more global, and for this to be not only Georgia's or some of its partner countries' successful examples who all also was successful during this pandemic. It should be exemplary for everyone. We must consolidate all interested countries and their support who will be involved in this project. Later on, we will make the presentation of latter, and we have this ambition that we are convinced we will have a support, and as a resolution we would like to present it project to the UN, which we're sure will be supported, and that will become as a the handbook or a guideline for any country. As Mr. David has also mentioned, we think that in May 2021 we would host international conference that will be dedicated to these issues. Naturally, Georgia as a host country, it accidentally was selected. It is substantiated by our activities or analysis of the international organizations that the countries that combated COVID-19 pandemic very successfully. Again, I would like to extend my gratitude to every one of you, and I do hope that our cooperation in the future will help us to better combat global crisis.
So good afternoon, and dear Minister, dear colleagues from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Government of Georgia, colleagues from the UN and UN agencies, other agencies, I'm very happy to be here and to also convey a few words and few messages on behalf of the International Organization for Migration. First of all, I think that I can also speak on behalf of other UN agencies and colleagues from the international environment. It has been almost a pleasure to be stuck during the COVID crisis here in Georgia. The efforts and the way that the Georgian government has managed the whole situation was really impressive and made us very privileged and comfortable in Georgia, and we have actually enjoyed this period of almost normalcy, especially compared to many other countries in the world. On behalf of IOM, I also want to commend the government of Georgia and particularly the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the way that they have addressed and managed the crisis and the situation of the Georgian migrants who happen to be stranded and in a very vulnerable situation in the other countries. The way that I think cannot be or is hard to be paralleled by the experiences of any other country in the world. We are part of this success, and that we had the opportunity to support the government since the early days. Actually, we have been a long-term partner to the ministry, and we had many joint endeavors in the past. And the Safe Migration campaign was one of such endeavors that was going on for years before the crisis hit. But when it happened, we were actually in the situation to need to adapt this campaign, which was basically addressing people in Georgia and informing them about the realities of migration and dangers of the irregular migration in Europe and in other countries. So we were actually in the first few days noticing the increasing number of people approaching us from Europe mainly and from abroad, and actually asking totally new questions and representing and reflecting new needs and very different situation of people who got stranded in predominantly in Europe, but not only. And we were in the situation to very quickly adapt and jointly with the ministry to always coordinate our messages and to actually pass the messages to people abroad and to direct them in most of the cases to the consular departments of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who would then later take on this process and provide assistance to the stranded migrants of Georgia. And then the rest of the story we know is the story of the successful return and repatriation. Also, IOM was happy to support through the information sessions. We were actually jointly with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs organizing information sessions for Georgian migrants abroad, which were also successful, and actually our contribution to this overall success of the government. And we also managed in this overall lockdown to also assist sporadically individual cases of return and reintegration of Georgian migrants stranded abroad. These numbers are a couple of hundreds. They are way less impressive than the thousands that the Georgian government assisted, but these were individual, very vulnerable cases, and actually it was a very different context. I must say that we are slowly resuming these functions with the reopening of air connections, and we are assisting more and more people to return to Georgia. Another interesting work that we have been doing in the past, but which has somehow got also a very different, which was seen in a different light, is the work with Georgian Diaspora. This is another area which has been a major area of IOM's work and one of the major areas in which we cooperate with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But I think that this crisis has taught us about its huge importance and also about the new ways to connect with the diaspora in the times of crisis, and also which has actually put also in a different light the potential the diaspora represents in the development of Georgia and also in the future endeavors which we are planning with regard to connecting diaspora with the socioeconomic development of the country. So we have a big agenda with this regard, and we also have some important meetings that are going to happen already in October, Diaspora Forum, which will be an online forum, but which actually will deal with the issues of how the diaspora can be mobilized and engaged in the development of Georgia, and especially now in the time when development is such a crucial word for every country. We are also working closely with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on supporting the ministry to extend and expand its capacity of dealing with the Georgian nationals abroad. We have plans to actually support the network of consular offices in basically providing services to stranded migrants and Georgian nationals abroad in a faster and more effective manner, and we have also learned a lot about that in this period of crisis. And last but not least, I want to mention that this big part of agenda that lies ahead of us, which is again related with the overall socioeconomic stabilization and development of the country. where we have to work together and put our efforts closer together in order to support this process. And for us in IOM, we look actually always we put priority on the work with the reintegration of returnees, and we obviously have a big work to do in the coming months and years, but also with making the situation of third country migrants better in this situation, and also in ensuring that they are integrated also in these important processes that lie ahead. So thank you very much once again. And I think that I am the last one before the video that is waiting for us, so many thanks again.
Again, thank you. Thank you all. Thank you to our partner company who conducted the survey. Naturally, we will analyze the survey in very detail because the conclusions would be very much helpful in our future activities. Of course, there are some gaps that needs to be eradicated, but the most important that what we have seen, this is a positive dynamic and outlook from our citizens, and this is a great motivator for any structures, for MFA, for consulates, would it be in Georgia or in any other kind of capitals abroad. So the citizens who are in the front lines, who are first in communication line with our citizens to provide assistance, naturally will consider and share experience that we saw. And of course, the sharing our successes with international community. And from today, we will begin our work to share not only success of Georgia, but also other successful countries that reached great success during this crisis. It is essential so these best or good practices to be combined, analyzed and shared with international society. And of course, Georgia's wish to initiate, along with other successful countries, providing assistance to stranded citizens to submit as a resolution to the UN. So our activity with this regard will be even more active in order for our citizens to avoid any potential problems, would it be abroad or during the repatriation process. I mean, pandemic has not gone anywhere. The fight continues, and no standalone nation can successfully defeat it. That's why cooperation and support is essential. And thanks to all organizations that together with us in this fight together. Thank you. Georgia's success during the pandemic, with the state's involvement, more than 22,000 citizens been repatriated to Georgia. Abroad, huge number of people received assistance. At the first stage of the pandemic, the ministry took tangible steps. Timely information about dissemination of the virus, also identification of the citizens and uninterrupted communication at the first stages, early evacuation of the citizens. the ministry's central apparatus was working 24/7 along with its diplomatic missions. Additionally, hotlines with the central apparatus that was tailored for citizens' need, effective communication to the citizens abroad, partnership and communication with all organizations, included diaspora initiative groups, with the young ambassadors, private sector. During the pandemic, to help our citizens, two key goals were defined together with the Coordination Council: providing assistance abroad, timely, gradual and safe return of the citizens. Also, with the support of the country, 22,800 people will return to Georgia. Overall, 74 flights from 27 countries were organized: Rome, Warsaw, Berlin, Minsk, Burgas, Tehran, London, Amsterdam, Athens, Washington, Kiev, Paris, Tel Aviv, Dubai, Erbil, Kuwait, Barcelona, Copenhagen, Madrid, Prague, Almaty, Riyadh, Oman. Goal 2. I mean, the country's main attention was not only to repatriation, but also providing assistance locally. Abroad, 23,094 people received assistance. Special criteria was developed and special attention was paid following groups: people with disability and people with a chronic disease, pregnant, underage, juvenile, elderly, students without stipendiums. Also, accommodation was provided to 1,968 citizens. I mean, goods or things of first use or essential use was provided to 5,252 citizens. Financial assistance was provided to 79 citizens. From city to city, from country to country, transportation services was provided to 4,640 individuals. Technical assistance was provided to 7,329 citizens. Assistance to find employment was provided to 307 citizens. With the help of Ministry of Healthcare, special online platform was established. Through this platform, the citizens are receiving consultations of epidemiologists, psychologists, and other healthcare specialists, with operative communication with our compatriots abroad. Additional, the hotline was introduced. Existing hotline was strengthened. Communication platforms were strengthened. 6.9 million kind of reaches. More than 19,000 telephone calls were conducted. Based on a study, majority of the citizens positively assess the state's activity. Majority of repatriated citizens or returnees explained that they would not be able to deal with the challenges without our country's help. And the majority of the citizens are declaring if in case of repeated need they would approach to the consulate abroad. More than 90% are stating this. This is a state's assistance during the global pandemic.